The age-old question when it comes to book publishing. Should I go with a traditional publisher or should I self-publish my book? Now, we're going to talk about the differences between both of these, specifically in relation to nonfiction books. So if you're writing a nonfiction book because you want to grow your business, you want to make an impact, then this is going to help you make the right decision based on what you are trying to do. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about my opinion a little bit down the road, but for now, I want to start off by just kind of understanding what the different types of publishing are. So first and foremost, this is traditional publishing. This is what you've heard a lot. This is what the rom-com show. This is what the videos show. This is what people have traditionally thought of when it comes to book publishing, which is where you are offered a publishing agreement by a publishing company in order for them to publish your book. Now, what does that exactly mean? Well, depending on the type of agreement you get, it can mean a lot of different things. But in a nutshell, you are essentially giving up a percentage of this book in exchange for them to do and help the heavy lifting of getting your book actually published. Let's talk about self-publishing. Self-publishing is something that has become incredibly popularized over time. And this is where you are taking the lead to publish your own book. Platforms that exist today that didn't exist previously have allowed it so that the barrier to entry to the book world is very easy. It's very low. So anybody can, in theory, publish their own book in the form of self-publishing. Now let's break this down. The old way of doing things was traditional publishing because that was the only way you could sell books. That was the only way you could get into bookstores. That was the only way that if you wanted to write a book and you wanted to be seen as credible, you had to have a traditional publishing deal. However, that's no longer the case. You have a lot of very successful people self-publishing their books, especially in the nonfiction realm. Alex Hormozy, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, originally self-published. David Goggins, professionally self-published. And so this is something that's really, really important to understand is that you can still be very, very, very successful no matter which option you choose. But let's also address something. The quality of self-publishing books can be a lot lower than the quality of a traditionally published book. And here's the reason for that. There are a lot less traditionally published books than there are self-published books. But just because you self-publish a book does not mean the quality of your book can't be identical to the quality of a traditionally published book. And I'm going to break this down even further. But the reason why there's so many bad self-published books is because they're done by amateurs. They're done by people getting a $5 cover. They're not being edited. Because the barrier to entry to publish is so low and anyone can in theory do it, people can put out a bunch of garbage. And so that's why a lot of times self-publishing gets a bad rep. Okay? And so I want to just be clear of how we're kind of defining these terms. But I want to tell you a little bit more about something which I think is really, really interesting. I wrote 4 best-selling books before I turned 30 years old. I self-published all 4 of those books. I have many friends who have self-published and who have traditionally published. And you'll see some of the differences as I break this down for you in just a couple minutes here. But I really want you to understand what works best for you based on your goals. And for me, my goals of writing books in the nonfiction realm are to make an impact and help a lot of people. My goals are to generate leads, get more speaking engagements, be seen as more credible, use my book to generate coaching clients, done-for-you clients, etc. Build live events on the back end. All of these things have come from me doing my own books. We've also helped 250 people do their own. And this is where we kind of adapted from me just being a book coach of just telling people how to do it to us creating our actual own publishing company. It's a big idea to bestseller, and we help high-level executives and entrepreneurs write, publish, and launch their books, but in a way that's self-published. Let me explain. You have self-publishing, which we talked about. You have traditional publishing that we talked about. Well, we've kind of jumped into this professional self-publishing world, self-publishing with a professional flair, where we can do all the services of a traditional publisher, but yet you as the author can retain full ownership so you can use the book how you want for your actual objectives rather than being chained to our objectives so that we could get paid. All right, and so this is going to be very, very interesting. And I just want to say this. For some people, it makes sense to go to traditional. For people, it makes sense to self-publish entirely on their own. And for a good portion of people, it makes sense to professionally self-publish with a company like mine or someone else's. My goal here is to just give you the information so that you're not blindsided one way or the other. So let's break it down here. Traditional publishing often takes a lot longer to write. Okay. When I've talked to my friends who have traditionally published deals, there's a deadline schedule, there's a flow schedule, there's often a collaborator involved, and it often takes longer to write the book. Self-publishing, you can write your book in what we call professional self-publishing here at Big Idea Bestseller. We call these lightning books. You can write this book in an hour a day or less and still create an incredibly high quality rough draft. I wrote my fourth book, Big Idea to Bestseller, that generated over 7 figures in revenue for our business. It was 32,000 words. I wrote that rough draft in 17 days. We've had people follow the same process and do it in 27, 29, 34 days. And these are high quality books that have hit the bestseller list, sold thousands of copies, and have led to back end revenue. Okay. Very, very important to understand that not one way is the right way. Now, I'm going to be honest as we continue here. I run a professional self-publishing company. I am biased towards what I believe to be the most effective use case of your time to get you the best results possible and to give you the best opportunity. Okay. So here's the second thing that you got to really understand is when you have a publishing deal, they're going to take a majority of a percentage of your rights or of your royalties. Okay, so for example, I have friends that are traditionally published and they make $1 or $2 per book after their advance has been recovered by the publisher. Okay, so they make maybe $1 or $2 per book, depending on the agreement that they have with said publisher. When you professionally self-publish your book, you'll maintain 100% ownership of the IP, of the content, of the rights, and the royalties. So every time someone buys a book, whatever the royalty amount is on that book, you actually get to pocket that. You do not have to give that to an agent, a publisher, or anybody else because you are the sole owner of your book. One of the biggest advantages of this that I have seen as someone in the book publishing space is the ability to use your book how you see fit for your objectives. So I want to give you an example here. If you want to give away your book as a professionally self-published author, you can do so. And all you have to do is eat the cost of what it costs you to print a book, which it's often anywhere from $2 to $4 depending on the links. If you have a traditional publishing deal, there is a price that needs to be paid in order for you to be able to do this. Sometimes authors will get a certain amount of copies for free that they can give, but once you exceed that amount, then you have to pay a certain amount to get the books and then give them away. Oftentimes that's more expensive than $2 to $4 that you would pay to get your author copy. So this is a really, really powerful thing is that when you have ownership, you can use it how you want. A great use case of this is when I go to speaking events. I will bring books and I'll either have a contract where I'm selling the books or I'm giving them away in the swag bags and the VIP gifts for attendees. And I can do this and I can give as many of them as I want. And I could focus on, instead of getting the $1 to $2 royalty or the $5 to $10 royalty, I can focus on using that as a way to generate the right leads for my business. And those leads can be worth a lot more to me than the few bucks that a royalty will pay me out on. Okay. Next is most of the time, traditional publishers, you're going to want 200 to 300 plus pages of content. And the reason for that is because books used to have to be sold on a bookshelf. And so you wanted a little bit bigger of a book so that it had a higher chance of being seen on that bookshelf. And while this makes a ton of sense, that's not necessarily the only way to sell books anymore. As a matter of fact, Amazon's the biggest bookstore in the world, and most of their books are sold online. And so you have to really understand that and think about that. Yes, bookstores are cool, they're amazing, but what's actually selling the copies? Where do you want to be seen? Do you want to stand out on Amazon that sells the majority of books, or do you want to stand out in a bookstore in a random local town? It depends on your goals and your objectives. But that's also why I encourage people to write books that are about 150 pages or less. Again, we call these lightning books, quick bursts of insight, flashes of insight. And 150 pages or less, the reason why I really like this is instead of me focusing on will it get seen on a bookshelf, I'm focusing on will it get finished by my ideal reader who can then hire me to speak or can hire me to work with them in a high level capacity. Again, what's your objective? What's your core focus here? All right. The next piece here is this. When you work with a traditional publisher, you will have limited creative control. Why? Because publishers, they've been doing this a very long time. They have their way of doing things. And sometimes it's amazing, right? They've been around for a very long time and they produce some really amazing books. but it's not necessarily always exactly the way you would want it done. So there's a give and a take there. On the flip side, when you professionally self-publish, you have full creative control. Because you own the whole thing, you ultimately have the final say. If you want a cover that someone doesn't recommend, but you love it or you believe in it so much, you can choose to do that. And then guess what? If a year or two goes by and you really don't love it, you can always have a second edition and change the cover. Why? Because you own that, right? And so it's really important to understand, do you want full creative control or do you want to have limited creative control? Again, make sure you're choosing the option that's best for you based on your objectives. Let's talk about timeline. Traditional published books often take 18 to 36 months to launch. So that's anywhere from 1.5 years to 3 years to go through that entire process. Whereas if you self-publish your book, you can get this thing done in as little as 90 days. Again, my book, Big Idea to Bestseller, I had that written, published, and launched on the bestseller charts in 87 days. A full-length book that has then, again, generated 7 figures plus in revenue for my business. All right, so you don't have to wait a certain amount of time. A lot of people will finish their book in professional self-publishing in under a year. If you can commit about an hour a day, 3 to 5 hours, 3 to 7 hours a week, you should be able to have a really high quality book that you're proud of, published and successfully out there within a year time frame, okay? And then the last thing that I really want to share here, traditional versus professional self-publishing here is that, and this is probably the biggest misconception, just because you have a traditional publishing deal does not mean that that publisher is going to market your book. And this is something that unfortunately I hear so many authors say, I want a traditional deal because they're going to sell my book for me. They're going to market my book for me. And while traditional publishers have some incredible connections, and they can, for certain authors, put a lot of money behind their books, market them, get them massive, massive distribution everywhere. And that's amazing, right? That's not the case for most authors, let alone most traditionally published authors. And so it's really important to understand, what are your expectations going in on this? What is your actual contract? What is your actual agreement? What does your actual deal say when it comes to distribution, selling, and marketing? And the reason I'm so strong on this is because, and I really want you to understand this, is because I have a friend, they just had a traditional publishing deal. And the first thing they came to me was said, Jake, my publisher isn't going to market my book. They now want me to spend part of my advance and then more money on top of that to hire a publicist at $5,000 a month. They want me to invest in other marketing efforts. And so I was like, wait, so you're telling me that you're giving up a majority of every book sold of the profits and you're the one though that still has to go now pay and market your own book? And they were like, yes, until we sell X amount of copies. And then there's a tiered system. And I was like, okay. And they were like, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Can you help me with this? I said, well, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? And they were like, no, I don't have the ability to do this based on my current deal. And I said, okay, so then you got to go back to step one, right? And so we walked through this whole process, and it was really interesting because they were under the impression that their traditional publishing deal, amazing, they got it. They were under the impression that they were going to sell the books and distribute the books, and they were just going to be able to collect a check all day long, every day. They were going to be super famous because of this book, and it was just going to go on like that. But when you professionally self-publish your book, what you want to make sure you do is you want to make sure that when you do this, you get the right support and the right help. So running the right campaigns, running the right bestseller launch strategy, running the right PR campaign that doesn't cost $5,000 a month. Do you have an author website? And really making sure that the book leads to the objectives that you have. And that's the killer thing here between all of this is traditional publishers they're investing in your book, right? And so they're making money based on the amount of sales that you have. When you professionally self-publish, you're investing a fee for the opportunity to make unlimited amount of money on the back end. And so these are just some of the things that go on with traditional publishing and being aware of that versus what you have to look forward to if you professionally self-publish. The key of this all, no matter what direction you choose, is you need to make sure that you get your book done. Because if you want to write a book, you should. Your voice matters, your story deserves to be told, and your message deserves to be shared. And so if you get to the end of this and you're still thinking to myself, which direction's best? It's, well, what do you value? Do you value speed? Do you value time? Do you want to be able to start today and actually move forward? Or do you want to have to go pitch yourself a bunch of times, find an agent, find all these things? Do you think that you can already get a publishing deal really quickly and get a huge advance? versus investing in someone else? Do you value ownership? What's your ultimate goal of this book? And I want you to really, really think about that, because that's going to help you create your path. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way to doing it. But if you want your book to be done in less than a year, have 100% ownership, and still have a really high quality book that you're proud of that you can use for a decade plus to come, then you might want to consider professional self-publishing. All right, so these are the different options. And now, like I said, I've mentioned this a few times. I wrote a book called Big Idea to Bestseller. It's literally a step-by-step guide on how to actually write, publish, and launch a nonfiction book. Now, in that, I break down the differences between the publishing a little bit more, but I also give you an exact roadmap on going from step A all the way to step Z in the process of creating a book. And I'll give you a free copy of that, because I just really want you to have the right information. And you can go to bigideatobestseller.com/free-book to grab a copy of that. Now, if you're interested in exploring professional self-publishing and you're curious to learn more about it, I'd love to build out an entire book roadmap for you. I'd love to walk you through what are your goals. I'd love to walk you through what's stopping you. Is it time? Is it not knowing what to do? Is it feeling alone on this journey? Whatever it is, I'd love to walk you through how you can overcome that. And then I'd like to put out and build a step-by-step game plan for you so you can know how to get your book written, published, and launched in record timing. And so if you're interested in that, go to bigideatobestseller.com/call, and we'll take care of this for you. So hope that you enjoyed this breakdown. And like I said, I'm biased. I believe for the majority of people who are writing nonfiction books for business growth that they should be doing some version of professional self-publishing. I believe that having 100% ownership is the key to success. I believe that being able to use the book for what you want versus what someone else wants is a massive, massive win. I believe that if you have a small audience, this is a great way to build your audience. If you already have a massive audience, then you already can move your own product. So why do you need to give up most of your rights to somebody else in control? And so for most people, I believe that writing a book through the form of professional self-publishing, creating a high quality book that you're really proud of while keeping 100% ownership, is the move for most people. So again, if you're interested, you can grab a free copy of my book, Big Idea to Bestseller, or book a time and we can do a whole step-by-step game plan for how you could create your book in this year. Alrighty then, see you next time.